City News Time, 9 o'clock.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, September 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 12 degrees, 13 in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Hospitals will be hit across the country with protests this afternoon at 2 o'clock. That includes the general campus on Smythe Road. Premier Doug Ford is calling the planned anti-vax protests selfish, cowardly, and reckless. Ottawa's mayor among those not thrilled about a possible disruption for staff and patients.
When protesters get in the way of healthcare professionals doing their jobs during a pandemic, that's when Jim Watson says they cross the line, saying he won't have it and implores anyone attending a protest to be respectful, but noting that Ottawa police will also be there to respond as needed. Garda World Security adding that you should be avoiding any protests and more could take place at other healthcare locations across the city. So if you need to head to a spot, do plan on taking additional time for your commute. And 3 city councillors with a letter to city brass, Sean Menard, Catherine McKenney and Jeff Leeper, with the hope that a safe passage zone can be created for staff, patients and visitors to the hospital, with the expectation that the City of Ottawa would use any tool in their legal toolbox to do so. Chris Curry's City News.
City News Time, 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud for the area today. The high about 22 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy and 9, and then tomorrow we'll start with sun and cloud, get into some showers, but not until the latter part of the afternoon tomorrow, the high 22. That's the high today, 22.
And right now in Ottawa, 14, it's 13 degrees in Smiths Falls. As Eastern Newfoundland continues working to get their power back after a storm hit over the weekend, another one, Tropical Storm Nicholas, is strengthening just off the American Gulf Coast. Could make landfall in Texas as a hurricane today.
The 2021 Atlantic hurricane season reached the letter N in its alphabetical listing of storms when Tropical Storm Nicholas took shape in Mexico's Bay of Campeche and began moving north toward the U.S.
If you're prepared now, you don't have to rush to get prepared, okay?
Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner says Nicholas is expected to remain a tropical storm, but
it doesn't have to be a hurricane. That's what I want people to know.
Some of Houston's deadliest flooding has come not from hurricanes, but from tropical storms. Jim Ryan, ABC News, Dallas.
We're now entering the home stretch of the federal election campaign. Just 1 week left for party leaders to try and convince you to vote for them. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau in Vancouver today. Both Conservative leader Erin O'Toole and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh are campaigning in Ontario. Elections Canada estimating more than 1.3 million voters have already cast a ballot in person. That was just on day one of the advance polls on Friday. That is more than during the 2019 election. Today is the final day for the advanced polls. The board at Kansas City Southern Rail has ruled that a takeover offer from CP Rail is superior to one offered by CN.
The American Railway has announced it plans to terminate its deal with Canadian National and sign a definitive agreement with Canadian Pacific Rail, which has made a proposal valued at about $31 billion US, including debt. CN has 5 business days to make changes to its $33.6 billion offer, including debt. The U.S. Surface Transportation Board dealt a setback to CN last month when it rejected that railway's plan to use a voting trust to complete the deal, something it's approved for CP Rail. Don Kelly, The Canadian Press.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Ottawa. Oh my goodness, are you ready to rumble? My goodness, we are in the last week of the election campaign, friends. Do we have something to talk about? We have got lots to talk about. Let's start on a positive note, shall we? What is the beginning of this week bring us? What does it bring us? Smile Cookie Week, my friends. That's right. It is Tim Hortons Smile Cookie Week. There it is. Oh, there. Let me get it up there. There we go. Smile Cookie Week for those of you watching on Rogers TV. There it is right there. By the way, Derek Fage here filling in for Rob Snow. Rob off this week. Back again for its 25th year, Smile Cookie Week. All proceeds before tax. Every dollar goes to the Snowsuit Fund here in Ottawa. Over 625 charities across the country, Canadian charities across the country, going to be benefiting from this. So again, from September 13th right through all week long, Smile Cookie Week. So go stop by. You can order online too, by the way, TimHortons.ca. You can order online. You can order a whole box of them. We had a couple of boxes here delivered this morning. A big thanks to the gang who delivered them this morning. So that's the positive note that we start on. Let's have a look. When it comes to the election campaign, Rob loves this site as I do. Let's go over to iPolitics. iPolitics.ca. What's happening as far as they're concerned? What are some of the losses and gains? Well, today's polling results showing more movement in Quebec and Ontario in opposite directions, by the way. In Quebec, the Liberal side continues, while the Bloc Québécois have hit a high point in their popular vote count so far in the campaign. In Main Street Research's 3-day polling average, the Bloc have actually overtaken the Liberals, but they're also showing that growth may have slowed. Next couple of days, by the way, could tell us if there will be yet another shift in momentum in Quebec. As of today, 3 long-held Liberal seats are now being threatened by the Bloc. Ontario, however, the Liberals have expanded their lead to a full 8 points. And we also see the PPC holding steady at about 10 points, which, threatens Conservative campaigns in the province, right? Got to think about that. Liberals' growth would give them another 3 seats in crucial battlegrounds. Those could determine the nature of the next government. This is what iPolitics.ca is reporting. Continues to be a little change in the prairies, although the Liberals are further consolidating their grips on up to 3 seats in Edmonton and in Calgary. Now, the overall picture, surprise, surprise, we've been seeing this in the polls. Still a Liberal minority. $600 million later, in an election campaign, it looks like we're going to have a Liberal minority. So what are the main leaders doing? Where are they at, Derek? What are they doing? Where do they find themselves today? Well, Green Party leader Annamie Paul has moved east. She's taken her campaign to Prince Edward Island, where she's going to drop by a barbecue at the University of PEI just before noon. She's going to hold a press conference as well this afternoon. And then she's going to dial into a virtual Toronto Centre all candidates meeting this evening. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet will start his day talking judicial appointments in Gaspé City Hall. In the afternoon, he will meet the mayor of Grande Vallée. And Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole starting the day in Carp. Yes, beautiful Carp just outside Ottawa here. He's going to make an announcement and chat with the press, and then it's back to his Ottawa headquarters for a virtual town hall event with Ontario voters at 7 p.m. and BC voters at 9 p.m. Also in Ontario, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, he's going to speak with the press at the Wasaya Airways Airport in Sioux Lookout, and visit First Nations this morning as well. Maxime Bernier, he's taking his tour to Alberta. His day will include a rally in Cold Lake, a campaign event in Lac-La-Biche, and another rally in Fort McMurray. And then finally, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. He held a rally in Oakville Sunday night, but where he is today, iPolitics.ca saying that remains a mystery. So we should probably find out during this show, I am sure, if you keep listening to us all the way until noon. Let's talk about that rally in Oakville. It created a lot of buzz, okay? A lot of buzz over the weekend. Into this morning as well on social media. Spoke to a crowd of supporters for about 20 minutes, urging supporters to get out to vote Liberal on September 20th. His speech was, how could I put this, incredibly dramatic for the drama teacher. I've been honest with you. As I fill in with Rob, I have voted for 4 different parties over my lifetime. David, stop shaking your head over there. I have. In a moment of weakness, I voted Green Party. I'm not going to lie. I have voted NDP. I have voted Liberal, and I have voted Conservative. But this speech was so incredibly dramatic. I mean, it's typical for him, but there were a couple of moments that had some media commentators in attendance raising eyebrows on Twitter. The National Post, John Ivison, was tweeting live from the event, by the way, and a great article, by the way, in today's National Post, if you want to look at some of the recent numbers and how things are looking for each party, in particular the Liberals and Conservative Party. But his tweet, one of his tweets from the live event said, "Vote Liberal or die" appears to have been the theme of the speech tonight. Now, there's... Listen, let's be honest. It's no secret that John Ivison is not on Team Trudeau, right? He doesn't make that a secret. That's fine, right? That doesn't bother me whatsoever. You're allowed to have an opinion. And he was, of course, embellishing. Maybe not just a little bit, maybe a lot as far as some of you are concerned. But here's a clip of what Trudeau had to say.
If you want a future where everyone can find a family doctor and no one has to be on a wait list for mental health counselors, if you want an affordable home, if you want assault weapons to stay illegal, if you want Canada to lead the world on good, green jobs, go out and vote Liberal. And above all, my friends, if you want this pandemic to end for good, go out and vote Liberal.
Wow. There's a promise for you. Listen, gang, this is easy. You know, if you want to afford a house, and if you want this historical pandemic to end, who knew? All we had to do was vote Liberal. It was as simple as that. Wow, I mean, I'm out of breath just listening to him. I can't imagine. He even sounded out of breath. My goodness. Okay. That wasn't his only brow-raising line of the night, by the way. He also took time to admonish Conservative leader Erin O'Toole's position on mandatory vaccinations and tried to paint O'Toole as the leader of the anti-vax movement.
We just learned that Mr. O'Toole is just fine with his candidates who aren't fully vaccinated campaigning inside seniors' homes.
Oh, that's one candidate, by the way.
Does any of that make sense for our families, for our kids, for our economy?
For our future?
No, it absolutely does not. But you know who it does make sense for? The far-right anti-vax wing of his own party. The mobs of anti-vaxxers who are harassing doctors and nurses, waiters, and business owners. Did you know what he just said to them?
Oh, boy.
That there's room for them in his big tent party. That's who he's chosen. That's the path he wants to take. And it just isn't right.
In his big tent party. Well, okay. I think you probably, from listening to me, know by now, I am a pro-vaccinator, okay? Get out and get vaccinated. For the love of God, help us get out of this thing, people. For those of you, of course, that have medical issues, I'm not asking you to get vaccinated. Don't call in after the 10 o'clock news and say, Derek, earlier on the show, I heard you say that we all need to get vaccinated, have to get vaccinated, but I have a health issue. That's not who I'm talking to. However, this idea that you are not going to be the leader for Canadians who refuse to get vaccinated, I think you should be speaking for all Canadians, vaccinated or not. I understand let's send the message out. Please get vaccinated. It's the best thing to do. But to then turn and say, you're not part of my Canada, I don't know if that's the right message. I really don't. Let's talk a little bit more polls. I'm exhausted already. It's only 9:15. Polly's predicted outcome. We talked about Polly late last week of the next Canadian federal election. Polly's still seeing this is the artificial intelligence. They gather information, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands pieces of information and data online. They're mining for information. Sees a 1.7% chance of a Liberal majority and a 45.1% chance of a Liberal minority. Also a 47.6% chance of a Conservative minority, interesting, and a 2.9% chance of a Conservative majority. So we'll continue following Polly. I'm sure we're going to have them on the show as we get later on in the week, right? Because we want to see they've successfully predicted every election so far that they've been a part of, I think going back to 2004, something like that, David? All right. I'm almost out of time here, but I got to say, protests planned in front of hospitals across the country. We're going to be talking about that in the Talkback Hour. Of course, that's after the 10 o'clock news. Our number, 750-1310. Derek Fage here, still filling in for Rob Snow this week. And we want to hear from you on this today. What should be done about these protests? Should they be allowed to continue? The Ontario NDP, which, oh my goodness, we talked about that on Friday. If you were listening on Friday, we tried to get Dave Smith, MPP, Conservative MPP, to say, yes, I agree with safe zone legislation, but he hadn't seen the legislation. So maybe we'll catch up with Dave on Friday of this week and see if he's had a chance to read through that. Safe zones to be set up around hospitals so that people cannot protest around them. We already have this for abortion clinics, by the way, which I'm sure most of you know. And is it a necessary step, or is it unreasonable to limit on the right to protest, right? We can talk about that. Another topic in the mix today is national debt. Our federal leaders have been crisscrossing the country for weeks campaigning with hardly a mention of plans to eliminate Canada's 400 odd billion in pandemic debt, 350, 400, who knows what it's going to be at the end of the day, at the end of the fiscal period. Do we have a responsibility to pay the pandemic bill in the next generation? Or is it okay to shoulder Canadians who haven't even been born yet with that burden? So call me at 613-750-1310 after the 10 o'clock news on that. Love to hear your thoughts on that, because here's a proposal for you. This will get you fired up. How about this? Would you consider a temporary cough, COVID tax to help pay off the record debt Canada has accumulated due to the pandemic? Perhaps something like, and David came up with this idea. Not that he supports it. He just came up with the idea. Don't call David and start yelling at him, okay? Perhaps a doubling of the GST, which brings in about $40 billion. We double it to $80 billion to put that $40 billion aside, and we help pay off the debt. So there's a couple of questions for you. Hospital protests, COVID debt. All right, I've gone over time. Let's take a break. Coming back with Walter Robinson, former political staffer, campaign worker. As we move through this final week, we're going to get his thoughts on the campaign trail. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on Rogers TV and City News.
Ottawa Markets was created by the City of Ottawa to help rejuvenate the outdoor markets program in Byward and Wellington West, where we have the Parkdale Market. And so we set to work on bringing in the right team with the right experience and reaching out to local vendors and local farmers, because we knew when we did a survey of our customers that was the one thing that was really important to them, both at Byward and in Parkdale, is to start bringing back that local product. And that's what you can see behind us here at the York Street Farmers Market. We put in place a Farmers First policy, which means that we will deal with farmers from the region first. And we're going to give them priority in terms of placement. They're going to have reduced fees in coming to the market. We've also made it free for any farm that's been in operation for under 2 years. The market also put in place a BIPOC initiative, which is a Black, Indigenous, and Peoples of Color initiative, which provides grants and support opportunities for folks from those communities to come on out to the market to reduce systemic barriers that have existed. As a farmer's market, we can have a variety of vendors here, from an artisan to a microprocessor who's taking local ingredients and putting them into a product in a kitchen and selling that, to breweries and distilleries this year, which were changes that the province put in place, which allowed us to bring in a few of those vendors as well, which I think is a nice surprise for people sometimes at 9 in the morning after a pandemic. But it's been going really well, and some of the breweries have been pretty appreciative, because for them, whether it just be doing delivery or curbside pickup, it gives them an opportunity to come back out and talk with their customer and talk about what makes their product so special. Throughout the market, the health and safety protocols that you're going to see, masks are still required. That is obviously the case, and you'll see a number of signs noting that around the area. We've got a number of hand sanitizer units, I call them droids, throughout the area that you can sort of just grab a pump or a squeeze wherever you go. But what we've also had to do is reduce the number of vendor spaces we have in the market by 50%. This ensures that we can guarantee that our vendors are going to have that distance, that we can, have a little bit better flow around the market. But what we also did was, as I said, we created the York Street Farmers Market, which is just microprocessors and local producers only, and that's on Saturdays. In Parkdale, we launched the night market, which is bringing a lot of the same content, but in the evening, and residents are sort of spilling out into the park. So we're looking at what we're doing as trying to support, create, and enhance public space for the residents of the city. It's been great. The community, which is what this market is here for, and then as tourism comes back, obviously we'll welcome all visitors. But the response has been really great. The community's come on out. They're speaking with their wallets and their dollars, which obviously at the end of the day, we want a great experience, but it needs to be a valuable economic opportunity for the vendors who are coming out.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Hoo-wee! That's what I call an opening to a show right there, eh? I hope I got you fired up. Right? My goodness. We are in the final, the final stretch of the election campaign. By the way, our next guest was a federal candidate in 2004. He did debate prep in 04 and 08 for Harper, door knocking, etc. 30 years in politics. 30 years of experience in politics. So, you're like, Derek, yeah, all well and good listening to you, Where are your credentials, Phage? Hey? I've got nothing compared to Walter Robinson. He is a former political staffer and campaign worker joining us on the show this Monday morning. How are you, Walter?
Good morning, Derek, and it's been great to listen to you for the last few weeks. You've got the rant down pat. What a way to open the show.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Walter. I appreciate that. So, as I've said, final week. What do you think the priorities are for a federal campaign in the days before the vote?
It's about locking up your vote, IDing your vote, playing offense or defense. I call it the 3 Ts. There is the trends of the polls, and I'm not talking the national polls, but the internal polls that the parties have. This is not a national campaign. This is 25 to 30 regional and local campaigns around the country. Then it's the tonality. What tonality? You can learn a lot from the leaders. Are they calm? Are they relaxed? Are they pleading? Are they anxious? And then the thing to follow is the tours. The tours go, apart from Aaron O'Toole, who's doing another couple of teletown halls this evening, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
The tours go where the votes are, and you can really tell a lot from the tours. I can tell you in 2004 that we thought we were winning, and then Paul Martin rolled into our riding 8 days before the campaign and helped turn it, and the Liberals, I lost by 2,000 votes. So where the tours go, the national leaders tours and the secondary tours, where's Minister Freeland going? Where are some of the other Liberal ministers that are not in trouble but can do regional tours around their provinces, or some of the top opposition critics? Are they going into other ridings because the Liberals think they can steal one from the Tories, or the Tories think they can play in parts of 416 and 905 and take a few seats from the Liberals? Those are the things to watch. It's all about the tours at the end of the day, really, and the messaging and the tonality of that messaging.
Walter, you mentioned, are they calm and cool and collected? Did you listen to any of Trudeau's rally last night in Oakville?
Yep.
That wasn't very calm, cool, and collected.
No, it wasn't calm, cool, and collected.
He
but
was
there is
fired
still
up.
a thought. I'm chatting with a few Liberal strategists, and they're telling me that a fired up, an anxious, a passionate Justin Trudeau comes to his message, and it's what they're trying to do in terms of rally the base and look at some swing voters and say, it's us or it's those bad Tories. You don't want those Tories. So, and this is just classic closing of a campaign. It seems that his anxiousness or a bit more of his passion is playing to be fighting. And the polls are interesting, right? Because now we're seeing nationally that it looks like the Liberals have a 2 to 3 point lead. But again, it's all about what's happening in the regions. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
If you took polls, let's talk about Toronto for a second. If you took the polls for most places from the 427 in the west to Bloor Street over to the east to Don Valley Parkway, south to the lake, that's all red versus orange. You really need to look at those internal riding polls of who's on top. But then you look in higher in 416 and out into 905 where it borders into 416, and then you need to see what are those internal polls there, what are the issues on the ground between Liberals and Conservatives that maybe, if the Conservatives think they're doing well in certain ridings, they may be encroaching into Toronto. Or here in our own region, think about, it's mostly where I am, and east of Bank Street, it's kind of red. It's as red. I like to say sometimes you could run the second coming of the Savior Almighty, and he's going to finish second if he's a Conservative by 5,000 votes in these ridings.
Yeah.
But if you think about Canada, I think Canada may be in play between the Conservatives and the Liberals. You think about Ottawa West Nepean. If O'Toole has a bump, then you could see that being in play. So those are the sorts of things, those internal regional dynamics that are really important for the campaigns, and this happens across the country. If you go up Vancouver Island, you could be in parts of BC, you could have type 3 and sometimes 4-way races given the predominance of the Greens that can be in double figures. And then you have the Liberals, the Tories, and the NDP splitting. So it's just fascinating. And the fact that the national polls are really close tells us the regional dynamics are even more important.
Right. I think Trudeau has definitely defined his narrative, right? He's pro-vaccination, the anti-vaxxers are turning into mobs, and these are the kinds of people that Aaron O'Toole is reaching out for so far. What about the narrative of the other party leaders? How would you grade their efforts into defining their narratives?
Well, I think you're right on the first one. It is about the Liberal brand and Trudeau. That has become part of the ballot question. So he's running with that. His strategists are running about that.
Right.
The Conservatives are running about it's time for a change, secure the future. Are you worried? Do you have the anxiety about debt, about programs, about where the economy goes post-COVID? I think we're in COVID for another year, unfortunately, given where the variants are.
Right.
Jagmeet Singh is the most interesting for me. I think he's really performed well. O'Toole's performed well on his first campaign. This is Jagmeet Singh's second campaign. He's been very calm, very collected, very comfortable in his own message and narrative. His challenge, though, I can tell you, is that he can say, I've been progressive. I've pushed the Liberals on a lot of things in the last 2 years. His challenge, though, is for the tour. His tour is the most scattered where he would have to go pick up votes. He was in BC. There's some stuff in Northern Ontario. There may be places where he has to play a little defense in Quebec, given, I think, the three-way race between the soft nationalists and the hard nationalists, where the Tories are trying to appeal to soft nationalists.
Right.
The DQ is harder nationalists, and the Liberals are trying to hold their own in on the island of Montreal and maybe some other parts outside of Montreal. So I think all three major national leaders have done well. And Annamie Paul, coming out of the English language debate, she looked great.
Yeah, I agree.
Sadly, her party looks like a condo corp having a fight over the reserve fund, and they'll never come to a decision.
Yes, I agree 100% there. But yeah, I agree. She did. And speaking of the English language debate, in your circles, did it help anyone? I don't even think the format could even lead to helping or hurting anyone. What were your thoughts?
3 letters, ITQ, inside the Queensway. That debate was built for a bunch of people here who live in this city, and the rest of the country couldn't really care. The format was awful, and when you're the debate, I know you chatted about this last week, and I'm just going with the consensus there. I don't think it really helped anyone, and it wasn't debates hardly since the free trade elections in 84 and 88. 88 specifically, debates really haven't turned the tide one way or the other. They basically solidify people's impersonations, and the pundits, 72 hours, they still can't agree. And especially in this day and age, I don't think a lot of people pay heed to the pundits, because whether they're in Toronto, Montreal, or Ottawa, they're considered inside the Queensway.
Yeah, and I think the rallies probably do a heck of a lot more to sway people's opinion. I mean, you may not, see the entire 20-minute, rally that some of them have, but you will get those bits and pieces. And now in this day and age of social media, where we can get, lots of information of what's going on, do you think those campaign rallies make a big difference?
Not as much. The clips may play. Again, it's for the base. They're going at this point in time. I don't want to say you're going through the motions, but it's rinse, lather, repeat. Especially on the local campaign, it's ID your vote, get it out. We had 4 days of advance polls. I went and voted on Friday. And I could tell you at the high school in the East End where I voted, and there was Elections Canada did well in terms of safely and doing it distancing. I didn't see anybody happy there to be voting. People were kind of just going through the motions and still asking, we're in a pandemic. We have other things to think about, but I'll go do my duty and vote. I think the electorate mostly around the country is disengaged, and turnout will be very important. I think turnout will be down.
Yeah,
and I think that usually plays. You can play for incumbents in many ridings. Again, this election campaign is so different in so many ways. A lot of conventional wisdom is just conventional.
Right. Walter, such a pleasure hearing from you again. It's been a while since I had a chance to speak to you, so thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity, and everyone be well and have a great week.
Thanks, you too, Walter. That's Walter Robinson, former political staffer, campaign worker. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking protests. The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario and the Ontario Medical Association are calling for safe zones around hospitals and other settings as we see protests happening today right across the country, many of them at hospitals. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. You're listening to City News.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, September 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 16 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Premier Ford calls it reckless. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson says protesting is a right, just don't infringe. Those upset with COVID vaccine rules are protesting at hospitals right across Canada today. It includes the general campus on Smythe in Ottawa at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Ottawa's mayor says police are well aware of this too, and a spokesperson for the force says they will be monitoring the situation. Final week of the election campaign, federal parties focusing on getting you to actually go out and vote. It is the final day of advanced polls today in your neighborhood, but you can still ask for a mail-in ballot. That has to be done by 6 tomorrow evening. If you don't want to cast one in person on Election Day next Monday, you can still get that mail-in ballot, but once again by 6 tomorrow evening. The new stunt driving rules are now in effect across Ontario, one of the first to experience the tougher penalty. A G2 driver in the region, OPP, tweeting that driver was caught doing 199 in a 100 zone. They lose their license for 30 days now, lose their vehicle to impound. Wait till you see the bill for that after 14 days. The OPP tweet warns the 417 is not the Autobahn. City News Time, 9:35. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off this week. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV filling in. By the way, local campaign coverage on Rogers TV. You can visit their website to find out the schedule, to find out what's happening. And if you want to hear from some of your local candidates. Protests. That's what we're talking about now. There are protests planned in front of hospitals across the country today. The group allegedly organizing the protests, Canadian Frontline Nurses, issued posts on social media calling for peaceful protests against mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers. I'm just looking at their tweet here that they put out. They have locations in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, here in Ottawa at the Ottawa Hospital, and then Quebec, New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. Their taglines are Health Freedom Movement Standing Together Again for Informed Consent and Medical Freedoms. Peaceful protest, and then they have a hashtag. They're asking protesters to bring a flower and a note to leave in honor of someone affected by COVID measures, or share your story and how you've been affected. You just heard from Andrew Boyle in the news that our mayor has spoken out against it. So has Doug Ford. Many other MPPs have spoken as well. We'd like to get the perspective of the president of the Ontario Medical Association when it comes to the protest, Dr. Adam Kassam. Dr. Kassam, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Derek.
The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario and the Ontario Medical Association are calling for safe zones around hospitals and other health settings where patients seek the care they need, of course, and where healthcare professionals work. You're in this field, Dr. Kassam. What is just, first of all, just the feeling when people in your profession see these protests outside healthcare centers?
Well, Derek, we've heard from our doctors that a lot of the protests that have been happening over the past couple of weeks, and of course, we think that has, been an increase in terms of both scope and size, and possibly related to some of the political advocacy that's happening on the campaign trail right now. We know that doctors and nurses, as well as other frontline healthcare workers, are working tooth and nail to really care for the patients who they see in their hospitals, many of them who are COVID related, but also non-COVID related patients. And so it is disappointing to have these protests outside of areas and hospitals and healthcare institutions where this kind of treatment and life-saving treatment is happening. We know that people are frustrated. And one of the things I think is important to recognize is that any of these protests represent a very, very small minority of people in our society. But nevertheless, we know that people who go to hospitals are those who are sick, who have to get treatment, who are there for potentially life-saving care. And having the inability to get in and out of a hospital, for example, as a result of these protests, frankly, shouldn't be happening. And, when we think about protests at a political level, it's okay to voice your opinion, but when that impacts someone else's ability to get care, that's when things should change.
And I think we should certainly, look at those with certain health, underlying health issues that certainly cannot get the vaccine, and they aren't part of this conversation, Dr. Kassam. There are people that legitimately cannot get the vaccine, correct?
That's correct. There are, obviously, we've been hearing in the news, and of course, children under the age of 12 are not eligible. And so if it's a pediatric population we're speaking about, of course, they're at risk, given the fact that vaccines have yet to be approved for their use in this patient population, given their age. However, as you're describing, there are also immunocompromised patients who might be at an increased risk of getting COVID-19, even if they've had the vaccine. And so what we know is that their ability to receive care, timely care, proper care is paramount in the course of the pandemic. And we should have an environment where not only the healthcare workers, but also the patients that they serve should be able to do so peacefully and without interruption.
How do we go about, do you have any opinions on how can we go about educating and reinforcing the vaccine for those that are vaccine hesitant?
Derek, it's a very important point because as you're describing, we still need to get our vaccination numbers up. We need to have those conversations in our communities, in hard-reaching places where perhaps access to the vaccine is still a concern, or a lack of understanding, or proper information that's being disseminated can be a challenge. And so when we are having these conversations in our clinics with our patients, we want to focus on what is known about the virus as well as the vaccines. We want to be able to provide that important information, but we also want to listen. We want to be able to understand where our patients are at and hopefully guide them along this journey, because this is an important decision, and we are optimistic, and I'm confident that as we start having more of those conversations, we'll be able to get more people fully vaccinated.
For someone that has a serious reaction to COVID-19 and find themselves hospitalized, what kind of care are we looking at? How long are we seeing people that end up in ICUs? How long do we see them remain in hospital?
Well, Derek, the first point I think is important to make is we're now seeing that this pandemic has become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. This fourth wave is predominantly, far and away, being seen in patients who have not been vaccinated. And so when we think about the first few waves and the ICU capacities being really overrun with patients, generally speaking, now we're seeing that potentially continue to happen, but predominantly in those who are unvaccinated. And so their morbidity and even chance of unfortunately succumbing to the disease is quite substantial. I think the CDC or the FDA actually came out, I think over the weekend, saying that your chance of unfortunately dying as a result of COVID if you do not have the vaccine is 10 times that if you've already had the vaccine. And in certain circumstances, it's significantly higher than that. And so again, this goes back to advocacy, education, understanding, and respect for sort of that dialogue. And hopefully, as we're continuing into the months of the fall, we'll be able to get people vaccinated at a significant rate.
Where would you encourage people that, again, are perhaps anti-vaccination or hesitant? Where would you encourage them to go to? What kind of resources are available out there for them to find out more information, to have those checks and balances, I guess, that are incredibly important to them?
Absolutely. We know that there are many, many resources now out in the communities in all parts of the province, including in Ottawa where you are, or in Toronto where I'm at, or even in smaller communities. There are obviously health professionals who are available to speak to, whether that's a family doctor or a pediatrician or another trusted advisor in that community. That's usually where those important conversations happen. In fact, I had a conversation with a patient of mine over the weekend concerned about the vaccine, and we were able to kind of have a discussion. And so I think reaching out to someone that you trust who is local is going to be very important. There are also other hotlines that you can access through the phone or through Zoom, things like VaxFact, for example, in the GTA region. And so these are really, really good resources for people who are still on the fence, who are still concerned about the vaccine and want to have a direct and perhaps a very intimate conversation with someone that they trust.
Yeah, and one thing that, when people call into this show that are hesitant, that are anti-vaccination, they bring up the idea that, they didn't take as long as previous vaccines to approve this particular vaccine, and so I'm not comfortable using it. What is your argument against that?
Well, I would say, again, this is more of a dialogue, not an argument. But what I would say is that the studies that we have have seen now around the world. I think close to 5 billion doses of the vaccine have been administered worldwide. And the data is very clear that the vaccines work, that they're effective, that they bring hospital numbers down, they protect people against severe disease and illness as well as death. And so those numbers should give us a lot of confidence about the safety of the vaccine. I'm fully vaccinated. 98% of doctors across the province are fully vaccinated. So there is trust in this vaccine. And the remarkable thing is that we've actually seen these vaccines work not only here in Canada, but around the world to help people to restore healthcare capacity and to have us continue to move forward through this disease.
Dr. Kassam, excellent conversation on this. Great dialogue. Really appreciate you spending time with us this morning.
My pleasure. Anytime, Derek.
That's Dr. Adam Kassam, President of the Ontario Medical Association. Just to give you an idea how we're doing here in Ottawa, we're now at 87%, the percentage of Ottawa residents aged 12 and up who have had at least one vaccine dose, and 81%, the percentage of Ottawa residents aged 12 and up who are fully vaccinated. So we are certainly doing a great job here in our community. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We will be back with Barry McLoughlin. We're going to be talking Jody Wilson-Raybould. She has given the Globe and Mail a sneak peek at her book. Of course, we're going to be talking about the final week of the election and the debate post-mortem. Barry McLoughlin coming up. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me, I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song for my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what the grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the show. Derek Fage here, filling in for Rob Snow. Well, The tell-all book about the SNC-Lavalin affair is coming out tomorrow. That's right. Jody Wilson-Raybould coming out with her Indian in the Cabinet, Speaking Truth to Power. It's obviously not going to look good for Trudeau, but you have to wonder, is there going to be any effect on him as far as voters go? Mostly from what I'm hearing, it's most people have put it behind them. But don't take my word for it. Let's talk to senior partner of TransformLeaders.ca, senior fellow with the Masters of Political Management program at Carleton University, Barry McLoughlin, joining us again today. How are you this morning, Barry?
Doing great, Derek. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. The Globe and Mail has given the book a bit of a sneak peek as they had a chance to sit down with her for an interview. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that interview whatsoever, but before we get to that, it's not going to look good on Trudeau, as I said, but is it going to really do anything to hurt his campaign, do you think?
Well, it doesn't help, right? I mean, it puts him on, it reminds people of, quote, the scandals, and so that's a week before the election, and people are already casting their votes. So I think it's harmful at least indirectly, it gets him off message, gets him on the defense. On the weekend, he had to say, I didn't force her to lie. That became the newsworthy item out of all of that. I think in political reality terms, however, I think as they would say on Bay Street, it's already, the price is already baked in. In other words, we already know what we think of the whole thing.
Right.
People are probably not that movable as a result of it. There was a lot of controversy around the thing. People that are going to vote against Trudeau because of his handling of the matter have already, they're already invested in that. So I don't see it as a big direct mover of votes. It's just, in political communications terms, boy, was this bad timing to have this happen. I think very deliberate timing, by the way.
Yeah, I think so too.
On the author's part, but not great timing for the Prime Minister.
Have you heard anything? Did anything stand out? Have you had a chance to look at some of this sneak peek? Is there anything, is there any bombshell that's going to come out of this?
Well, the one bombshell is, he forced me to lie. He pressured me to lie. He pressed me to lie.
Right.
That's the number one thing. Everything else is sort of inside Ottawa. So to me, that's the thing. And he had to say I didn't press her to lie. So it becomes a he said, she said. And, beyond this, and that's happened to the Prime Minister a number of times. It boils down to he said, she said. And I guess she has her own reality or whatever it is. So I think that in the end, it's wrong for the substance, probably, if we believe her. And I don't think she would do a whole book just to lie about it. But I think in the same time, I think people already have their views already on that. I don't think it's that movable.
We were speaking with Walter Robinson a little bit earlier on the show, and what's the narrative? How are these leaders defining themselves? I think from what I saw at the Oakville rally for Justin Trudeau is he's the pro-vaccine. He's he's talking about the anti-vaxxers as this mob, and these are the people that Aaron O'Toole is reaching out to and asking for their support. So I think I know where, and most listeners and those watching on Rogers TV know where he stands and know what his message is. What about Aaron O'Toole's message? What would his war room be focused on right now?
I think what their focus is on the economic plan going forward. Where do we go from here? How do we grow Canada's economy? How do we get people back to work? That's clearly been his complete focus as much as he possibly can. And he's got to get onto that. He's got to make sure that people equate, jobs and 3% annual growth. We've only hit that once in the past decade. So is he the guy to do it? He's got to give us a very strong, compelling narrative about how we benefit as Canadians economically from what's been going on out of this and get back to full employment and moving Canada forward. That's his key focus. And he's got to make sure he's not playing defense for the last week of the campaign either.
What about Jagmeet Singh? What should his focus be? Because I think he's lost a lot of ground. I think people like him, right? He's a likable guy. But is he a leader?
Well, look, the NDP have a strong base of support that tend to stay with them. I think the real danger right now for Jagmeet Singh is the strategic voting that has happened in elections. If people think, oh my gosh, Justin Trudeau's going to lose to Aaron O'Toole, well, I better not park my vote with the NDP. I think I'm going to hold my nose somewhat and vote with the Liberals this time just to keep Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives out. I think that's what his greatest worry is right now.
I want to turn my attention to Abacus Data, because this is from David Coletto, who we've had on the show with Abacus Data this morning. This is something he had to say, and I'll get your reaction. He said, the internal question after every leaders debate is who won. Here's one takeaway from the sole English language debate. Jagmeet Singh was most likable by a wide margin. Aaron O'Toole scored the second best reaction among voters. Trudeau was close behind in third. Abacus also asked respondents how much leaders did to earn or lose their vote. Trudeau earned the highest marks on both questions and lost more votes than he gained. O'Toole was second on both counts, coming out even. Almost 3 times as many people said Singh did more to earn their vote than lose it, which shocks me because I thought Singh was a very poor performer. What do you agree with any of that?
Well, it might be all true on its own, but I think when you look at the debate, it was seen as a debacle. Most people hated the debate more than the politicians, so it was like, they tuned out probably halfway through, went back to tennis. I think that it was just a horrible debate format. I'm not going to blame the moderator, I'm going to blame the format. Secondly, the one that needed to really do well and reverse the slide and get back into momentum was Justin Trudeau. He didn't do it. Maybe he couldn't do it because he was quite restricted. Everybody's attacking you. You don't get a chance to do a coherent thought back other than a soundbite.
Yeah.
He never got out of the starting gate. Aaron O'Toole, I think, won on perception. He seemed unflappable, cool, and perception is huge in these debate things. Most people don't remember hardly anything of content, but they remember how the leaders struck them, whether somebody they could perceive as the prime minister. And I think Aaron O'Toole won on that. Jagmeet Singh, I wasn't that impressed by. He was on defense quite a bit. He normally does better than that, in my own view. So he neither won nor lost, but I do think that the actual winner was Aaron O'Toole. He needed to make sure he didn't have one of those awkward, it was his only English debate. He's never done a national one before. And he actually avoided getting hit in the head with a punch that he didn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
He was very solid, let's put it that way.
We like to do predictions on this show, so let's have some fun and do some predictions. Producer David says he's predicting a Liberal minority, but they lose 5 to 10 seats in BC and Atlantic Canada. I'm saying they're going to lose 3 to 5 seats in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, and I'm also predicting a minority government. What's your prediction?
Boy, I hate doing it myself, but he's going to lose seats. This is not going to be as strong as it was in 2019, the Liberals. They're going to lose some in BC. They're going to lose maybe, they're going to lose a handful in Atlantic Canada for sure. They're going to lose a few in Quebec. Maybe they'll lose a few in Ontario. In the end, it's still a Liberal minority to lose. In other words, that, don't forget, if he even has the same number of seats as the Conservatives, he can form a government. He can have commitment to go forward, and he would. He's not giving over the keys.
No,
even a few
not.
seats down, he can still do it. So I believe that right now, a week out, it's a shaky Liberal minority. But if whoever has the momentum in the last week, Aaron O'Toole could continue his momentum, and if he does, he could squeak out a Conservative minority. So that is well within the realm of possibility.
What do you think the odds are that Trudeau wins a plurality, but the House won't support him for another mandate?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the name recognition is
the NDP,
too great.
They said, no, we're going to vote the Conservatives, and said, that's not going to happen. The Bloc is kind of interesting, because of Legault. He's kind of supportive of O'Toole. Maybe the Bloc could be persuaded. But I don't see that happening. I actually don't. I think the one that can engineer another minority government are the Liberals, given the other parties. But, I think in this uncertain world, I think he has to, just for belief by Canadians, he's got to have a plurality of seats.
Right.
Even one seat. I mean, don't forget 1972, the Liberals beat the Progressive Conservatives by 2 seats. Yeah. And held on for another 18 months in the government. So it's doable, like father, like son.
Oh, God, please tell me we're not doing this again in 18 months, Barry. Please.
It could well happen.
It could. Barry, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure, Derek.
That's Barry McLoughlin, Senior Partner, TransformLeaders.ca, and Senior Fellow with the Masters of Political Management program at Carleton University. Guess what's next, my friends? It's the Talk Back Hour, the 10 o'clock hour, the Talk Back Hour. We're talking hospital protests. They're all over the news. Terrible stories. You're hearing of grieving families, healthcare workers getting yelled at and hit and spit on while trying to get to hospitals. Should government step in to stop these protests? That's one question we have. And COVID debt. It's the last week of the campaign. No one's talking about COVID debt. Is this a big issue? Would you consider a temporary COVID tax? If you don't call about this, I don't know what you're going to call about, to help pay off the record debt Canada has accumulated due to the pandemic, perhaps even doubling of the GST. Oh, yeah, I'll get you fired up. Give us a call. 750-1310 is the number. 613-750-1310. Derek Fage filling in here for Rob Snow on Rogers TV and City News.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News. Now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, September 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, the Ontario Medical Association, both strongly condemning the anti-vaccine protests that are planned for outside hospitals right across the country today. They're calling for designated safe zones around healthcare facilities to protect both staff and patients. Now, these protesters opposed to vaccine mandates are planning demonstrations outside hospitals, including the Ottawa General Campus on Smythe at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Here's City News reporter Chris Curtis.
The Ottawa Hospital in a statement says they disagree with the demonstration and plan to beef up security this afternoon to ensure patient care is in no way affected. Comes after 3 city councillors joined the province-wide chorus to create safe zones around hospitals where staff, visitors and patients can access their buildings safely. The mayor imploring protesters to be respectful today and says Ottawa police will be prepared to respond if necessary, and they tell me they will be on scene and monitoring the situation. Garda World Security says there could also be smaller protests at other healthcare facilities throughout the city, which Premier Doug Ford has called these protesters selfish, cowardly, and reckless. Chris Curry's City News.
City News time, 10:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud for the area today. The high about 22 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy and 9, and then tomorrow will start with sun and cloud, get into some showers, but not until the latter part of the afternoon tomorrow, the high 22. That's the high today, 22.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 16 degrees. It is crunch time for the federal election campaign. It's the final week now. Party leaders hitting ridings they think can help launch the candidate to victory. Today is the last day for advance polling as well and marks a week to go until Election Day. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
No more courtesy visits to ridings. In this final week, each stop is designed to help their party win a hotly contested seat. The NDP sees Northern Ontario as a potential win, with leader Jagmeet Singh taking a visit to Sioux Lookout and criticizing the Liberal record on affordability.
We know that rent's gone up astronomically. That means more and more people can't find a place to call home. We know that the cost of living is going up. When Mr. Trudeau promised to bring in pharmacare, something that we passionately believe in, by breaking that promise, that's hundreds of dollars a year that families could have saved.
On top of hitting battlegrounds in these final days, leaders and parties are going to boost their pressure efforts to get you to mark your X. Leading up to Election Day, expect phone calls, text messages, emails, door knocking, a swarm of ads, and the NDP is even targeting users on the Nintendo game Animal Crossing. Liberal Justin Trudeau is in Vancouver today. Conservative Aaron O'Toole in Ottawa, and Green leader Annamie Paul has left Ontario for the first time in this campaign for an event in Prince Edward Island. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time 10:04. One company, 15,000 jobs across Canada. This is Amazon promising well above minimum for the new employees.
Amazon is also boosting the starting pay for frontline hourly employees by 27% to $21.65 an hour. Current employees are getting raises immediately, regardless of how long they've been with the company. Amazon Canada has 25,000 full and part-time workers in 25 communities across 5 provinces. It's been growing rapidly due to the pandemic-driven explosion in online shopping. Don Kelly, The Canadian Press, Toronto.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
That's right. Give us a call. 750-1310. Derek Fage here, filling in for Rob all week long. It is your hour. It's the Talk Back Hour. What are we going to talk about today? Couple of things we're going to talk about. First of all, hospital protests. They're all over the news. Terrible stories. I mentioned, grieving families, healthcare workers getting yelled at, hit, spit on while trying to get into hospitals. My question is, should government step in to stop these protests? Should we create safe zones around hospitals so that protesters cannot harass workers and visiting families? In Ontario, by the way, we already have safe zones around abortion clinics. Those were brought up in early 2018. Abortion clinics across the province have an automatic 50-meter protest-free safe zone around them. Hospitals, pharmacies, and other health facilities may also begin applying for similar buffer zones of up to 150 meters. Yasser Naqvi was the Attorney General of Ontario at the time. He's now running for the Liberals in Ottawa Centre. He was very involved in pushing this legislation through at the time. Ontario's NDP are proposing a new law that would extend similar protection to healthcare institutions to protect them against these protests against COVID-19 health measures and vaccine mandates. So, would this be an unreasonable restriction of the right to protest? 50 meters? 50-meter protest-free safe zone? I mean, your right to protest still remains, right? Or under the circumstances, do you think it's reasonable, to have safe zones around hospitals to protect staff, patients, and families accessing health care? A lot of different people weighing in on this. Again, our number, 750-1310. The Ottawa hospitals saying those demonstrating outside of the hospital are putting not only staff and physicians at risk, but also the hundreds of patients who come to the hospital for care every day. They're also stating that the hospital has increased its security presence to protect staff, physicians, and patients and ensure that patient care is not impacted by the planned protests. Jim Watson has chimed in, Alex Munter, Andrea Horvath. Want to know your opinion on protests. The other question we have is COVID debt. I mean, it's the last week of the campaign, and not one leader has devoted any time, 0 time, talking about the historical debt that we are taking on, the COVID debt. Maybe it's not a big issue for you. I'd like to know, is it a big issue? Would you consider, and I know this is tough to consider, but would you consider a temporary COVID tax to help pay off the record debt Canada has accumulated during the pandemic? an idea floated by David, and don't be angry, it's just an idea. Don't call David yelling at him. He has feelings. Well, one or two feelings. How about perhaps a doubling of the GST? The sales tax brings in about $40 billion every year. An option for COVID-19 debt reduction could be to double it and maybe reserve the extra revenue only to pay back money borrowed during the pandemic. Another option could be to implement a special COVID tax or a levy to create a pandemic debt fund. This would be renewed until such time as there is consensus that the nation's balance sheet has returned to an acceptable state. Both the Liberals and Conservative parties are proposing more than $300 billion in deficits over the next 5 years. $300 billion. Okay, those are projected to shrink on an annual basis down to a manageable $25 billion under the Conservative plan and $32 billion in the Liberal platform. The NDP's platform, well, you don't want to know. Let's just say those numbers could perhaps double. Let me remind you, back in 1917, as a temporary measure to help finance the war, the federal government introduced the Income Tax War Act, covering both personal and corporate income tax. After the war ended in 1918, the government still needed to pay for war-related expenses such as veterans' pensions and debt interest. So in 1920, the federal government introduced the sales tax, right? And by 1948, income tax was no longer considered temporary, and the Income War Tax Act was replaced with the Income Tax Act. So I can understand if you're a little pessimistic and you're saying to yourself, Derek, there's no such thing as a temporary tax. But these are interesting times, right? These are interesting times. So your opinions: hospital protests and a COVID tax, let's call it, to help pay off the debt. Those are our two questions for you today. Let's head over to Ryan in Ottawa, who wants to talk about the protests. Good morning, Ryan. How are you today?
Hey there, pretty good.
Good. What are your thoughts on these protests across the country?
Well, I'm not really for the way they're going about it. Like, no one should be spit on or stopped from doing their jobs. But other than that, I'm in full support of it because my wife's a nurse.
Okay.
They're declared heroes for the last year, frontline workers, whatever. And now thousands of them are out of work because of the new vaccine mandates. So
your wife is not going to get vaccinated. She doesn't believe in the vaccine. Is that correct?
No, because her and several other nurses that she knows have seen way more health concerns caused by the vaccine than they've seen COVID patients.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Quite.
What do you think? Just turning the page here. What do you think about this idea of a type of tax, sort of a COVID tax, to help pay off this debt we find ourselves in?
Yeah. The HST that's still going on is a little weary, but it's probably, if they could do it in the right way with a guaranteed close on it, maybe.
Is there ever a guarantee in government, Ryan?
No, it's pretty scary.
Yeah. Ryan, really appreciate your call. Thank you for calling in today, and I hope for the best for your wife, and a big thanks to her for, regardless of her opinion on vaccinations or not, I'm sure was working on the front line, so my hat's off to her and a thanks to her.
She's one of thousands that are at home.
Right.
Kind of yesterday's heroes, today's criminals, so.
Appreciate the call, Ryan. Thank you so much. Let's head over to Tracy in Nepean, who wants to talk about the protests as well. Tracy, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I have a son who's in BC, and he ran into these protests 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And he was going in for dialysis. This is a life-changing event for him.
Right.
Meanwhile, they're blocking ambulances. They're blocking pregnant women that are coming into the hospital. And what they're doing to the staff is disgusting. Right now, my husband is in ICU. He's been in the Queensway Carleton and also at the Civic now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
The staff there is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And from my experience, I don't want anybody in the hospitals that don't have their vaccinations. I don't care who they are. They need to be vaccinated. These people are dying.
Tracy,
it's not from COVID.
I imagine. Yeah, I mean, that's something else we have to think of as well, right? This isn't just about, COVID care in hospitals. This is also the fact that you're doing damage to people who need to get to hospitals in emergency situations. I imagine you would support then creating the safe zones, such as we've done for abortion clinics across the province.
Yes, I would really support that. No problem.
Because I don't think, as far as most people I have spoken to, nobody is against, protests in general, right? I mean, that's part of our right here in Canada, is to peacefully protest. It's just where they're doing it, right? And go ahead.
In Kelowna, they were not peaceful. And that's what the problem with these protests are. They are not peaceful. I want to see the police out there, and I want them to create a barrier against these inconsiderate, entitled people, thinking that because they don't want a vaccination, that they can come to a hospital and demonstrate. Demonstrate anywhere else, but not at a hospital.
Tracy, really appreciate your call, and all the best to your husband. I hope he gets well soon. No, you're very welcome.
Thanks.
All right, our questions again. Hospital protests. Should we create safe zones around hospitals so that protesters cannot harass workers and visiting families? Should government step in to stop these protests? We're hearing from a lot of people. Alex Munter, Andrea Horvath, Jim Watson has spoken out on social media as well about this, and also our COVID debt. Nobody's talking about, no leader has devoted any time to talking about COVID debt. I mean, we're in historical debt. Is this an issue for you at all? Would you consider a temporary? I know it's hard to imagine it, as we've seen many, a few temporary taxes here in this country no longer become temporary, but would you consider it if there was some sort of guarantee to help pay off the record debt Canada has accumulated due to the pandemic? This is the Talkback Hour. Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. Our number, 750-1310. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, especially with the virus going on. It did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. Earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, and this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend Doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, or they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain times, so I'm glad to do that.
Back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
The phone lines are open and the lines are starting to fill up. This is what I love. That's what I love to see. We have one line open. Get in, get your call in. 750-1310. Most of you want to talk this COVID debt. As I mentioned just before the break, last week of the campaign. Not one leader devoting time talking about debt and how we're going to pay this off. First of all, is it a big issue for you? And for some people, it's like, you know what, just print more money. I don't care. You know, debt is dead, whatever. You know, would you consider a temporary COVID tax to help pay off the record debt Canada has accumulated due to the pandemic? Perhaps a doubling of the GST. I hate this word, but let's unpack this a little more. It's such a government word, you know. I can just see them all sitting in, you know, the Public Alliance of Canada. They're all sitting in there, and then one person says, you know, I think we should unpack this a little more. I think we should, you guys, shouldn't we? Should we unpack this? I'm going to throw a ball to you, Barry. Okay, I'm going to throw the ball. When you catch the ball, you unpack it. Right, David? You can see it. And I'm picking on the government, but you see it in private firms as well. Listen, I've worked in the accounting field, and we had a consultant come in and did that little game, right, where you throw the ball around. Derek, you've got the ball. Unpack it. So let's unpack it, shall we? The central idea here is generational fairness, okay? That's what many people are saying. Do you believe we have a responsibility to pay off the pandemic debt in the next 18 to 25 years? Is it right that we pass on this burden to Canadians who have not been born yet? Or even to David? You know, he's in his 20s. David's going to have to pay this off. I might not even be around in 18 to 25 years. God, I hope so. I got so many plans, a lot of big plans. If your answer is yes, we have an obligation to tackle this debt in the next generation. The only way is by creating significant new revenue for the government. The only way to do that is through, guess what? New taxation. We know how that works, right? These temporary taxes. But, you know, let's just pretend for a moment that there is some kind of guarantee that can be put in place, and we cannot backtrack this. In 18 to 25 years, 25 being the maximum, this tax will come off the books, and we have paid for all of this. Want to know your opinion. 750-1310. Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. Let's over to Paul in the Byward Market, one of my favorite spots. Paul, how are things in the Byward Market?
All right, I guess.
Okay. Well, let's move right on then and talk about this COVID debt. First of all, is it even an issue for you? Do you care about this debt we've accumulated?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I whether we like it or not, it's going to have to be dealt with. And when it comes to taxation, I have it in a way that, you know, when you have income brackets,
yeah,
on your income tax return,
yeah,
because each province as well as federal have different silos with databases that they can retrieve information with, which would be the OHIP card and your birth certificate.
Okay.
I say the tax is probably going to come whether we like it or not, but it should be separated between the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated on the percentage amount of taxes that they will pay. I think the non-vaxxers have to pay more, and if they're exempt, then they must provide it with their income tax return, just as any other proof that is required when you submit your return.
For instance, if they had sort of an underlying health condition of some kind, you would require a
That would
note.
have to be submitted with your provincial return.
Gotcha. So you're not up for David's idea of doubling the GST?
Oh, yes, like I say, but there would be two different brackets you would retrieve it from. The vaccinated at a lower percentage rate and the non-vaccinated at a triple, maybe even quadruple percentage rate.
All right.
Let them pay for it if they didn't believe that it happened or that what's available to us to protect ourselves is insufficient for them.
All right.
Pay for it.
Okay, Paul, appreciate the call. Thank you very much. There's an interesting perspective from Paul. Let's head over to Ron in Barry's Bay. Wants to talk COVID debt. You see, David and I talked earlier about this, Ron, and we said this will have people frothing at the mouth. And now the lines are lighting up like crazy. What do you think about this idea of a COVID tax of some kind, Ron?
Well, I no beef about somebody thinking outside the box. I think that's pretty cool, actually. But no, I think there's a better way. I think that if we build our pipelines, well, there's a lot of money. If we put a lien on all CCP-owned goods in Canada, that might be an idea.
Interesting. Okay. We could call them the COVID pipelines.
You know what? If we build that, well, how much are we losing every day? I believe it's $85 million a day that we lose on average because we're not sending oil off.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the number is, but that sounds about right. Do you think that we do have a responsibility to pay off the debt in the next 8? Because, the idea here being there's, that generational fairness. We can't just keep putting... And is it a big issue for you? Would you like to see the leaders talking about this more? Because it's been radio silence from them.
I would absolutely like them talking more. I'd like to see... like I said, we can't put this off on our kids. That's just wrong. I've got my 3 sons. They don't have children. I don't have grandkids yet, but I don't want them paying for Trudeau's folly. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, as much as we can put, some blame on Trudeau, there's no doubt, no matter who was in power, Ron, we would have had to spend, an extreme amount of money to help us get out of this pandemic.
Well, yeah, I guess you can look at it that way. I'm more in the Sweden camp. In other countries, I've handled it differently. I think all businesses were essential, not just Walmart and whatnot.
I see. Yeah. No, I've had this argument and debate with other people as well. There's small businesses who are better able to police themselves, having to suffer the brunt of the lockdowns. It's been difficult to watch. Ron, thanks so much for your call. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Let's head over to Mark in Ottawa South, who wants to talk COVID debt and COVID tax. Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
History has told the candidates that they dare not speak of raising taxes or any kind of sacrifice during their campaign.
Oh, it's political suicide, for sure.
One of them says, yes, truthfully, I'm going to make a tax increase. He'll immediately be attacked by the others, saying we won't do that. They'll get elected, and then they'll go and do that.
But, I mean, okay, maybe they don't have to bring up, the word tax necessarily, Mark, but certainly it needs to be talked about. No one on the campaign is devoting any time talking about the debt and how we're going to get out of this. Maybe they're not going to bring up the idea of tax. I agree with you 100%, but they should they not be saying something about it, how we're going to get out of it?
Well, I'd like to mention 2 historical cases.
Okay.
The 1974 election. Robert Stanfield, the Conservative leader, proposed that if he got elected, he would introduce price and wage controls for 90 days. Pierre Trudeau and the Liberals attacked him on that basis and said they would not.
Right.
Pierre Trudeau got a majority government, and a couple of years later, he brought in price and wage controls for several years. He did exactly the thing that he was mandated not to do.
Right.
Then let's move to the end of 1979, when the minority Joe Clark government proposed to put a tax on oil, to raise our domestic oil to the international level, which was historical and economic inevitability. Well, the government fell. And on the campaign trail, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the very same man said, no, if I'm elected, I will not raise the taxes.
And then what did he do?
He got a majority government, and he raised the taxes by a slightly greater amount.
I know, and it's inevitable. I mean, no one's going to talk about the tax. There's no doubt about it. Mark, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure hearing from Mark. We're going to take a quick break. We've got a couple of lines open now. 750-1310. We're talking about protests, and most of you want to talk about this COVID debt and the idea of COVID tax. But if you'd like to talk about the hospital protests that are happening across the country, please give us a call as well. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow on Rogers TV and City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, September 13th. Good morning, I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 17 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. A protest condemned hours before it begins. The target? Hospitals. Major hospitals right across the country, including the General Campus in Ottawa. Premiers, mayors, federal politicians all panning the vaccine measures being taken. The protesters who are protesting against those measures. The warning is out for people taking part. Be mindful of staff and patients in those buildings, not to block access, for example. Ottawa police say they will monitor the situation at 2 o'clock this afternoon on Smythe. One security firm also warns there could be other healthcare centers targeted other than the ones named, like the General Campus. COVID cases in Ontario number 600 today. The province also reporting 6 additional deaths. 2 of those, though, coming from a data cleanup from more than a month ago. The positive rate of COVID cases from the over 19,100 tests completed for these numbers is still over 3%. Of the new cases, 59 are in Ottawa, 7 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 3 in Eastern Ontario. No new cases today in Renfrew County. Final day of advance polling in the federal election. If you want to vote before Election Day next Monday and miss today's polling hours, you can still go to an Elections Canada office or order a mail-in ballot, but that has to be ordered before 6 tomorrow evening. The party leaders today focusing on ridings where they feel they could win a close race. City News Time, 10:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Well, thank you, Andrew Boyle. Thank you for that news update. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. It is the Talk Back Hour. That's right. 10 to 11 each and every day. It's your hour. The listener, the viewer. You give us a call. You tell us your opinion. We throw out some questions. You love the questions. You call 750-1310. We're talking COVID debt. That seems to be getting the most people riled up. Should we consider a temporary COVID tax to help pay off the record debt Canada has accumulated due to the pandemic? That's a question. Idea here is generational fairness, right? We're not going to put this on to the next generation. Do we believe we have the responsibility to pay off the pandemic debt in, say, the next 18 to 25 years? Is it right that we pass on this burden to Canadians who have not been born yet? If your answer is yes, we have an obligation to tackle this debt in the next generation. The only way is by creating significant new revenue for the government. The only way to do that is, as we know, is through some sort of taxation. Rick in Canada would like to continue on this topic. Rick, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a couple of quick facts here, Derek.
Okay.
Okay, the federal debt from 1870 till when Trudeau got into power.
I know where this is going, yeah.
Was $603 billion. So in 145 years, the federal debt added up to $603 billion. In just 5 years and 10 months, he's almost doubled it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're almost at 1.2 trillion now. Now, in that time, all the time that we've been accumulating this debt, we've basically just been paying interest on it, not paying down the actual debt. We've only paid down debt about 3 times in 150 years. All the other times we've been adding to it or paying interest on it. So basically, Canadian politicians are a bunch of deadbeats when it comes down to paying back money that they've borrowed.
Right.
And as for the next generation paying, my great-grandmother, the last of my great-grandparents, passed away in 1986. In the early 1970s, my great-grandmother and my grandparents were talking about how the kids and the grandkids are going to have to pay for all this debt. So we're already beyond the next generation. We're like 2 generations in, and we're paying all these high taxes now for all this debt. And these guys are adding debt like it's nobody's business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, David and I spoke about this last week, and then we brought it to our callers, is the idea. And I know this could get other people riled up, and you're welcome to call on it, but there are other options besides, consumption taxes like capital gains, right? Everyone loves the idea of capital gains on primary residences. There's been a rumor that...
Derek, why would I pay more? My property taxes are already over $5,000 a year.
Rick, I am a homeowner. I agree with you. Part of so many people's retirement plans are selling their primary residence and not paying a ridiculous capital gains on it. I have no problem with, the recreational residence or cottage, whatever you want to call it, having a capital gains on it. But
they claim they're concerned about the price of new houses. 40% of the price of a new house. So if $1 million is for the price of a new house, $400,000 of that is in taxes, land transfer, development fees, GST, everything else. If the politicians are that concerned, just say we're waiving all the taxes on a house, and I'm sure the average Canadian would be much happier paying $600,000 instead of $1 million.
Yeah, you got that right. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
It's out of control. I mean, the IMF stepped in 1993 when Chrétien just got into power, so they had no choice but to deal with it. Said they weren't doing enough, and in 1995 said you've got to cut even more, so Chrétien had to cut all the transfer payments and rate the pension plans. Well, the debt that we have now, doubling it in just 6 years, it makes that problem look like child's play compared to what we're facing now. So people aren't going to get a choice in this. The IMF is going to step in again, say Canada's insolvent, and here's what you're going to have to do to resolve your debt problems. And it's going to hurt a lot more this time around than it did in the 1990s, sir.
Well, and you look at, there's also the idea of the foreign buyers tax, right? Justin Trudeau, his plan. Well, that's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, 1%. What is the 1% going to do?
Exactly.
It's ridiculous, Rick. 1% is not deterring anybody because people, the foreign buyers are, for the most part, and I'm going to put it in the 90% range, they are very wealthy people, and they're coming in here to buy up homes in order to rent them out. Maybe they're doing some, kind of flipping as well. Why not make it something more, make it 50%, make it 75%?
This is so bad now, the amount of debt that's been accumulated in the last 5-6 years, and he's tried to blame it on COVID. It's so bad. We're beyond being in a debt trap. We are basically in a position now where we will be permanently bankrupt any year now.
Rick, really appreciate the call. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Really appreciate it. I want to remind you, we have a couple of topics that we're talking about today. Of course, COVID debt and the idea of a tax of some sort has been a big talker here on the show. So you can call us about that. But the other question is, we've talked about this repeatedly in our news item, is hospital protests. They're all over the news. Should we create safe zones around hospitals so that protesters cannot harass workers and visiting families? We already have safe zones around abortion clinics. A lot of people commenting on social media, the Ottawa Hospital on Twitter saying those demonstrating outside of the hospital are putting not only staff and physicians at risk, but also the hundreds of patients who come to the hospital for care every day. They've also announced that the hospital has increased its security presence to protect staff, physicians, and patients and ensure that patient care is not impacted by the planned protests. Our Mayor, Jim Watson, he went on Twitter to say, I've been made aware of a nationwide protest around hospitals planned for today. As Canadians, we have the right to express our beliefs. However, when these protests get in the way of the critical work of our health care professionals during the pandemic, I won't have it. He goes on to say, to those who intend to protest in Ottawa tomorrow, all I ask is that you respect essential health care services coming in and out of our hospitals. His final thought on that was, my office has engaged with Ottawa Police and they have advised that they will be ready to respond as required. And this is happening in every province across the country, by the way, not just here in Ontario, not just here in Ottawa. Alex Munter saying on Twitter, seeing lots of requests for anti-hospital protesters to please be more polite today. Sure, polite would be better. But if you're fed up with the pandemic, imagine how healthcare workers feel about it. These protests are hurtful and demoralizing. And then I can honestly hear him in an exasperated tone saying, maybe that's the whole point, right? And maybe it is. Andrea Horvath saying, cancer patients and exhausted healthcare heroes deserve to be protected from harassment. My safety zone bill, we talked about this on Friday. Remember, we had various MPPs, a Liberal NDP and Conservative MPP talking about this. My safety zone bill would make this targeted intimidation a provincial offense. Instead of hiding out, Ford can come back to work and pass my bill to stop the harassment right now. MPP Fraser calls on Doug Ford and his government to create safe zone legislation protecting patients and healthcare workers as well. It's tough to watch. And, I think this is just the divide between those that are pro-vaccination and anti-vaccination. The divide is becoming greater and greater. And you can see it in the election campaign, right? Justin Trudeau at his rally in Oakville. I mean, he certainly has now said, my narrative is I am pro-vaccination, and those mobs of anti-vaxxers who Aaron O'Toole says are welcome in my big tent here in Canada, is that what you want? And here, by the way, here's what Trudeau had to say, part of his vaccine rhetoric. Have a listen.
We just learned that Mr. O'Toole is just fine with his candidates who aren't fully vaccinated campaigning inside seniors' homes.
It was one candidate.
Does any of that make sense for our families, for our kids, for our economy? No, it absolutely does not. But you know who it does make sense for? The far-right anti-vax wing of his own party. The mobs of anti-vaxxers who are harassing doctors and nurses, waiters, and business owners. Did you know what he just said to them? That there's room for them in his big tent party. That's who he's chosen. That's the path he wants to take. And it just isn't right.
What do you think of that? You know, I'm pro-vaccination. When it comes to these protests, I'm in full support of healthcare workers. They've gone through enough. But creating more and more divide, I'm just worried. It's worrisome because it's playing into those anti-vaxxers. It's playing right into the mentality that they have, that they're getting more aggressive. I don't think it helps. I think he already has, for the most part. You know, most people agree with him. We see the polls. People agree that there should be vaccine passports, right? We're seeing it in Ontario. 80% of Ontarians want a vaccine passport. Look at the job we're doing in Ontario when it comes to those who've gotten a first and second dose, the percentages. Here in Ottawa, we're doing an incredible job. We're over 80% now with those 12 and over getting 2 doses. Maybe that's something you'd like to talk about, right? Is this considered now rhetoric that's getting needlessly divisive on this issue? Give us a call, 750-1310. We're also talking COVID debt. What are your thoughts on some kind of tax to help us pay for this, so that the next generation doesn't have to pay, or the generation after that? Do we have a responsibility, this generation right now, to pay off the pandemic debt in the next 18 to 25 years? This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. Our number again, 613-750-1310. You're watching on Rogers TV and listening on City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries, started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting, and anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not, but more so now because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff, and then again, their situations and their circumstances change.
Find your frequency.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off all week long. Derek Fage here filling in. Some people more comfortable, by the way, not calling us, but we'd love to hear from you. 750-1310. We have a couple of lines open, but some people more comfortable sending in emails. And I wanted to share another perspective, someone who was at one of the protests. Okay? This is from Deborah. Hi, Derek. Great show, and I am pleased to hear other opinions about the last protest at the Civic Hospital. I was there. We were nowhere near the hospital grounds. We were across the street. This was a suggestion by the organizers. No blocking of people going in and out of the hospital. The Ottawa physician who told you that story about blocking the hospital to the local news is definitely lying to the media. This is Deborah's words. The protests are mainly against vaccine passports and anti-Trudeau. All peaceful and people wanting a voice that is not represented on the mainstream media. The protesters are both vaccinated and unvaccinated. It's about vaccine passports! ! Why are more people not wondering why there's no contrast information re the vaccines? The information reliable treatment is available. The unvaccinated people are being coerced while they have no voice as to why they make their decision. Try having a morning talk show that lets unvaccinated people have a voice. It will never happen. Of course it happens on this show. We've had many unvaccinated people call and voice their opinion. Check out Rumble News and listen to Dr. Robert Malone. I have no idea who these people are. He invented the mRNA vaccine and is now telling people to delay taking it due to complications and many adverse effects. There are adverse effects for some, certainly. More deaths, by the way, due to COVID-19 than adverse effects. This message is being censored from the mainstream media. Why? Why not allow the public to hear it? Do you know that many unvaccinated people are physicians and nurses? True. I am a public health nurse who worked with virus, bacteria, and vaccines. I ask questions when something new is available, especially when it's a health issue. The COVID vaccine is a big health concern. It's a new type of vaccine that requires more time for study. Why is it being pushed on the public? This is a political issue. It's not about the virus anymore. It's about the vaccine push. Deborah, appreciate you listening to the show and sharing your opinion. This from Pat. I don't think we should have protest-free zones. I don't see how NACVI zones established around abortion clinics would even stand a charter challenge. It makes no sense. Well, we already have safe zones around abortion clinics, Pat. Again, you know what? Even if I disagree with you, it doesn't mean I don't. And, Deborah, I would say we do have unvaccinated people calling this show, and we have a respectful debate, and that's what this show is all about. Want to talk about Trudeau comments? We played you those comments just before the break, and Kate from Ottawa has called in. Would like to discuss those. Kate, what are your thoughts on that?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
I'm wondering if, previously when Justin Trudeau was originally running, very first off, he commented saying that he never reads news and he waits for people to tell him. Well, somebody should tell him that the main people who are against vaccine passports are actually his voter base. Middle-aged white women who absolutely love him. So I hope he continues with this protest of, his divide and his coercion and his hate. because it's just going to push people more and more to get rid of this guy.
You think so, Kate? You don't think it's because I think he's looking at the polls, and let's be honest, polls certainly don't tell the entire story, but he looks at polls and he sees across the country that a large percentage, over 75% of people, are in favor of a vaccine passport.
Well, it's coercion, but they can be in favor of it, but it doesn't mean that it's right. So
and interesting too, Kate, that you mentioned who is vaccine hesitant, and I think you're dead on, because August 11th insight from Abacus says the typical vaccine hesitant person is a 42-year-old Ontario woman who votes Liberal. That's according to Abacus polling.
Keep it up, Trudeau. Keep it up.
Kate, appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Let's head over to Mary in Alexandria. Mary, what are your thoughts on Trudeau's comments? Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Excellent.
Look, I wasn't going to call, but you put that clip on of Justin Trudeau, and when I talked with David, he gave me the answer, but I was angry because I thought, well, how could it's medical information, it's personal medical information if you're vaccinated or not.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how personal. I mean, for your kids to go to school, Mary, they have to show their little yellow card.
For an adult walking around, come on. I have both my vaccines. Okay, I have no. I'm not. It doesn't bother me to be vaccinated.
Right.
But however, since I'm vaccinated, and I also get the flu vaccine every year, I don't really care if the person sitting next to me has it or not because I'm vaccinated. You understand?
Well, you can still get COVID-19. However, what's that? Sorry?
You can still get the flu too.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I guess they're worried you're going to pass it on. They're also worried that if you're unvaccinated, you're going to you could end up with severe COVID and in the hospital and strain the healthcare system, right? That's the other argument.
That's what they were saying when nobody was vaccinated. But now I don't see how that can happen if 70% of us are vaccinated. Is that it?
Well, here in Ottawa, we're over 80%, 12 and over 80%.
And the thing is they never say what is the capacity of the hospitals. They never tell you. They say, oh, there's 2 more in ICU, but 2 more. Like there's about 50 beds for as an example.
Well, no, I believe they do share that data. Maybe we should share that information more. Right, certainly. I don't disagree with you there. Mary, thanks so much for your call. I'd like to get in one last caller here. Okay, take care, Mary. Let's head over to Edward in Kingston, who wants to talk about Justin Trudeau's comments. Edward, what are your thoughts?
Hey, how are you this morning?
I'm very good, Edward. Thanks very much for your call. How are you doing?
I very much appreciate your show. I listen to it quite regularly. I very much appreciate that you have non-biased attitude, and I very much appreciate that.
Oh, thanks very much, Edward. That's what we try here, right? I mean, we're not telling people that, you know what, you cannot have an opinion that is, that I'm opposed to. Let's talk about it. I mean, this is how we have respectful discussion.
Exactly. That's exactly what we have, a free country where we have the choice to do things, and I totally believe in that. But we have a prime minister of Canada that is not, he shouldn't be not making these comments. These comments that he's making are just dividing our country.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of people are feeling, vaccinated or not, is that it's a further divide, and it's even making that the unvaccinated even angrier. And we've seen how some of these protests at rallies have turned ugly.
Correct, but I just want to point out some things. First of all, this vaccine, I'm not a non-vaccinated person. I've vaccinated millions of animals over my life. So, I understand how a vaccine works better than probably any of the top virologists there are in Canada. I understand that.
Right.
I mean, if you look at what Dr. Brian Brittle has said, he's one of the top virologists top doctors we have in Canada. If you look at what he has said, and I mean, these guys, you mentioned Dr. Marone, there's Dr. Paul, all these guys that are coming out now. Why would that be? And what we have to look at is this is not a vaccine in a sense of a vaccine. You can't not call this a vaccine. I wish people would stop calling it a vaccine. It is at best a medical treatment, because even if you take the so-called vaccine, you still have to wear a mask. You still have to stay 6 feet apart. You still can get COVID. And now let's look at Israel. Israel has the most people, one of the 2 countries in the world that have the most vaccine rate. Vaccine. They are the vaccine rate there of people that are breaking out now with COVID-19 are all the vaccinated, not the unvaccinated, the vaccinated.
Well, I'd have to look at those numbers, Edward. I can't clarify those numbers and say. Edward, I appreciate you calling in. Unfortunately, I've run out of time today, but I'm sure this is something we'll be discussing for the rest of the week. So keep listening, keep watching on Rogers TV, keep listening on City News. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow. We'll be back with more right after this.
It's Monday, September 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 17 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Outside the Ottawa Hospital this afternoon on Smythe, one of many protests taking place opposing vaccine mandates across the country. This is scheduled to happen at 2 o'clock this afternoon and has drawn the ire of a number of city and provincial leaders. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
The mayor saying he won't have it, not when it gets in the way of the critical work of our healthcare professionals. And Jim Watson says Ottawa police will be on hand to respond as necessary, who tell me they will be actively monitoring the situation on the ground. There will also be additional security from the Ottawa Hospital, who in a statement say they have increased presence to ensure the safety of staff, patients and visitors. A number of city councillors have advocated for safe zones around hospitals, while local hospital leaders, like Bernard Leduc of Mulfort, imploring potential protesters not to block access to those who need it. Chris Curries, City News.
City News time, 11:02. COVID cases in Ontario, number 600 today. The province reporting 6 more deaths, although 2 of them are from a data cleanup from more than a month ago. The positive rate of COVID cases from these tests, over 19,000 were done, is still over 3%. Now, of the new cases, 59 are in Ottawa, 7 are in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 3 more in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. No new cases today in Renfrew County. And now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud for the area today. The high about 22 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy and 9. And then tomorrow we'll start with sun and cloud, get into some showers, but not until the latter part of the afternoon tomorrow, the high 22. That's the high today, 22.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 17 degrees. As we hit the home stretch of the federal election campaign, party leaders are now prioritizing the ridings where they think they can win. Today is the final day of advanced polls, and it also marks 1 week now to go until Election Day. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
Each campaign stop from this point on is going to be in a battleground riding as party leaders hope their presence gives that extra boost to put their candidates over the top. Today, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh in Sioux Lookout in Northern Ontario. Speaking on an airport tarmac, he targets the Liberals over their record on Indigenous issues.
Mr. Trudeau not making sure every community has access to clean drinking water means Indigenous people continue to be denied a basic human right of clean drinking water.
Also in these final days, expect campaigns to boost their get out the vote efforts. They'll be making phone calls, sending text messages, emails, door knocking, sending out a swarm of advertisements, and in the case of the NDP, even targeting gamers on Animal Crossing. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is in Vancouver, Conservative Aaron O'Toole in Ottawa, and Green leader Annamie Paul is in Prince Edward Island. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:04. Project Noisemaker concentrated on 4 areas of the city this past weekend, cracking down on those breaking the rules of the road. Officers were in Barrhaven, Canada, Orleans, and the Market. 61 charges were laid. 31 of those were for speeding. Also, 4 incidents of stunt drivers caught. They all face tougher provincial fines now, including losing your license for a couple of weeks and your vehicle for a month in the impound lot. 5 were caught with improper mufflers, and 1 was busted riding an e-scooter on a sidewalk. A study of more than 12,000 British adults has revealed that common eye conditions are associated with an increased risk of dementia. Independent of other potential influences like age and gender, the risk of dementia was 26% higher for people with macular degeneration, 11% higher for people with cataracts, and 61% higher in people with diabetes-related eye disease. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob off this week. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV filling in. Many of you, I'm sure, remembered where you were when on 9/11. Saturday marked 2 decades since that horrific hijacking that shook the world, killing nearly 3,000 people. On the 20th anniversary of 9/11, there are a number of events, of course, planned in the U.S. and elsewhere around the world. We of course talk about the 2 jets that the 2 airliners that flew into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. But we have to remember, another crash into the Pentagon, and then the 4th jet was brought down by passengers on board, knowing their peril, right? Crashing in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, before it could reach the apparent target, which was the White House or the U.S. Capitol. Great article today in the Kingston Whig-Standard. Geoffrey Johnston, a weekly guest, joining us on the show. And the headline of this article, Extremism Grows in the Shadow of 9/11. Geoffrey, thanks so much for joining us as usual.
Good morning, Derek. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, same here. And I think a lot of people perhaps don't necessarily believe that. I think a lot of people sort of feel as though, we're living in a safer world today. Are we living in a safer world?
Yeah, let me first acknowledge the importance of remembering 9/11, because 3,000 people were killed that day, including 24 Canadians. So it is always, 9/11's anniversary is always a solemn occasion. I think the world, I think Canada and the United States are safer today from mass casualty attacks. That is, an attack, possible attack where thousands of people could die at any one time. But there remains, I think, and there is probably an increased chance these days of smaller attacks where, a few people or, 10 people or 20 people could be killed in a terrorist attack. And as former President George W. Bush stated in an excellent speech that he gave on Saturday on the anniversary of 9/11, the international terrorists and the domestic extremists who live in the United States, and I would say Canada too, share the same kind of foul spirit. And the real danger today, according to Mr. Bush, he didn't say that the Islamist or jihadist threat was gone away, but he was saying that, and I agree with him, that there is a real threat from domestic extremism in the United States, and I will say in Canada too. And I think we are seeing these divisions in our society, and I think that there is a real potential for terrorism. And the United States Department of Homeland Security last month sent out a security bulletin warning of this, that people, extremist groups are radicalizing people online, and they're using the COVID-19 pandemic and the threat of additional public health measures as a way to radicalize people and even possibly use as justification to carry out terrorist attacks. So I think that in 2021, the terrorists that we face today aren't the kind that will fly planes into skyscrapers, but they are the kind who will bring weapons to a protest and shoot people. And by the way, there is an extremist on Twitter today, and she is a self-avowed supporter of the People's Party of Canada, and she has posted that so-called patriots should bring guns to the protests today at these hospitals, and that is abhorrence. And I know a lot of people have reported that person's account to the RCMP and others, and this is the kind of thing that we should be concerned about, because there is a potential for violence and terrorism in this country.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And I think that, for domestic terrorism on that front, homegrown extremists, as you pointed out, these online opportunities really help them, spread those narratives that they want to, because we used to have a situation where they like-minded people would gather in their basements or and share and voice their opinions to each other, but it was in small groups. And now with this, with social media, with various online forums allowing them to have a greater voice, it's becoming I think an issue that we have to pay more attention to.
Absolutely right. So the internet is the greatest communications tool in history, and it's a source of great knowledge, but it's also a source of disinformation, and it can also be used by people to organize. And we're seeing that across Canada, because we're seeing all these odious protests against hospital workers. It's madness. And there was a prominent anti-mask, anti-vaccine protester. I'm not going to say the guy's name because I don't want to give him more air.
Yeah,
but
good for you.
The thing is, he was online yesterday, and he had a speech posted, and it was all about the gravel throwing incident about a week and a half ago, where the Prime Minister and some members of the media were struck with gravel. And this guy was saying that more than that is going to happen to the Prime Minister. Millions of people are going to rise up and do more than that to the Prime Minister. And so those are really those veiled threats of terrorism. And this goes out to millions or tens of millions of people. And it will only take a small group of these people to do tremendous damage. And this is why we need better moderation on social media. And this is why people also need to be very vigilant and report these kind of posts to the RCMP, to the OPP, and your local police. I mean, as they say in the States, see something, say something. And
Yeah.
I agree with that because
I agree too, Geoffrey. Yeah.
We need peace, order, and good government in this country. And we are a democracy, and we have our elections, and we make our voices heard at the ballot box, and we can write letters to the editor, and we can have peaceful protests. But when people start throwing rocks, we're talking about bringing guns to protests, it steps way over the line.
Yeah, words matter. Right? I think we forget that. Words, obviously, throwing things for absolutely, but words do matter. And for those people that, free speech, yes, but there are consequences to the things that you say. Another thing you bring up in this article is, and I think it shows and it demonstrates that, domestic extremism is on the rise, is that hate crimes are on the rise, right?
Absolutely. So the FBI compiled a list of hate crimes, and they're compared to previous years. So in 2020, they have the stats for 2020. Hate crimes were up. It actually hit a 12-year high, and most of the perpetrators, the majority of the perpetrators of the hate crimes in the United States were white people, and the people who were being targeted the most were black people and people of Asian heritage. This is all in the shadow of Donald Trump, who was openly racist during his term, and so this gave extremists license to do these terrible acts. And by the way, it's not just African Americans and Asian Americans who are at risk. There are also many hate crimes against people who are Jewish, because the bigots never just end with one group. They don't just confine their attacks against one group. Everybody, ultimately is at risk for domestic extremism, because these people, when they move to actual terrorism, don't just, target one group. They will, set off a bomb or whatever in a public place, and they will kill anybody who is there. So this is something that threatens everybody, and this is why Canadians also should be, very wary of throwing their lot in with people that are racist or Islamophobic or anti-Semitic. And we're seeing some of this at these anti-mask, anti-vaccine protests, because a lot of these protesters have been heard to yell out racial insults at black police officers, Islamophobic comments. And by the way, there's a lot of misogyny in these movements.
Yes, yes.
It was interesting to note that a digital researcher found that these far right-wing American extremists were making common cause with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they were actually cheering on the defeat of American forces in Afghanistan, because these right-wing extremists agree with the Taliban that Western society is now too decadent and has led to what they think is the moral decay. And you even saw some prominent politicians in the United States sort of agreeing with this. There's this Republican, Lauren Boebert, I'm hoping I'm saying her name right. She went on Twitter and said, it looks like the Taliban are the only ones building back better. And of course, Build Back Better is Joe Biden's slogan for pandemic recovery. And she was seemingly giving support to what was happening in Afghanistan. So this tells you what, these far-right people who have gone mainstream, because if you're in the House of Representatives, you're mainstream.
Look at Maxime Bernier. Right? You talk about him in this article as well. I mean, it still frightens me how close he came to becoming the leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, he's called Justin Trudeau a fascist psychopath. He's got his base just foaming at the mouth, talking about tyranny. He's mentioned words like revolution and it becoming our duty. These are dangerous words for the leader of a party in this country to have a voice of.
Exactly, and I'm glad you brought that up. And he's also openly flouting public health restrictions that are in place to keep us safe from the pandemic. So he recently went to Manitoba, and Manitoba has a rule about visitors quarantining who aren't, if they're not vaccinated, they have to quarantine. And he is openly stated he's not vaccinated, and he showed up in Manitoba and did some events and said he wasn't going to quarantine and he was going to defy these rules. Well, we're in the middle of a fourth wave, and the cases are spiking, and, we're going to face a very difficult fall and winter. I don't want to scare people, but it's going to be tough. And the last thing we need are a bunch of extremists who are making things worse and who are also, feeding this outrage narrative that could, God forbid, actually lead to terrorism in this country. And we've got to be clear about that.
Yeah, agreed. Geoffrey, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Derek.
I want to remind everybody you can subscribe, by the way, to The Whig. Head over to The Whig. That's WHIG, thewhig.com, and subscribe. That was Geoffrey Johnston from the Kingston Whig-Standard, a weekly guest here on the show. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to The Rob Snow Show. This is Derek Fage filling in on Rogers TV and City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly, but it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients, and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and have the food there, you can really compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have from combos and to small sandwiches. One of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derek Fage here filling in for Rob. Thank goodness we have Dave as a weekly guest on this show. let me just say, because he brings us good news, right? We could use some good news. We've been talking COVID and we talking this election, this unnecessary election. Let's talk about some success stories here in Ottawa. Dave Sali, editor of the Ottawa Business Journal, joining me on the program as he does each and every week. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm pretty good, Derek. How are you?
I'm doing great. And in particular, because you were on the show to share some positive news instead of us going through all of this COVID news and election news and dividing this country. Let's build some bridges and talk some positive things and talk about some great success stories here in Ottawa. And we're going to start today with Catherine Tremblay, who is certainly not new to people in the business community, right?
No, not at all, Derek. She's Catherine is one of those real pillars of the business community. Just somebody who you want to talk about. I mean, you were saying we want to hear something uplifting today. Well, I mean, anybody who talks about Catherine Tremblay can't help but have a smile on their face when they do it. I mean, she is one of the probably most well-respected and well-liked CEOs in the National Capital Region, co-founder, CEO of XLHR, which is a staffing recruitment firm, and a series of other companies, Altus Recruitment, Altus Technology, XLITR. Those companies combined, she leads them, has done so very successfully for the past 3 decades. In particular, during the pandemic, they're on track to place more than 8,000 workers this year, and their combined revenues expected to top 150 million, which is actually better than they were doing pre-COVID. So for those reasons and many more, we haven't even talked about her community service and what she's done for the wider Ottawa community, not just for business. She is OBJ and the Ottawa Board of Trade's 2021 CEO of the year.
Incredibly well deserved. And I've met her before, and my goodness, it's hard to believe it. What, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, she started XLHR. Is that right?
That's right. 1989.
Wow.
She and her then partner Antonio, the two of them together launched the company. They later became her husband, and they ended up having 4 daughters together. And another just really inspiring sort of adversity for Catherine. Of course, Antonio died 5 years ago of prostate cancer, and since then, Catherine has really had to shoulder the load of leadership in the companies, but it's something that she's been doing her entire career. They started out with basically, as she said, as nothing as it gets. Back in 1989, driving around in a beat-up old Chevy to drop off resumes because Derek, they could not afford to fax them. They didn't have a fax machine.
That's unbelievable.
I know.
Okay, exactly. I want to get to another great news story, and that's Carleton's $65 million business school stepping onto the world stage. Tell us about this.
Yeah, absolutely, Derek. Another big news story this week. This is the new Nickel building. It's called, named after, of course, Wes Nickel, Carleton alumnus. He was a home builder, here, well-known entrepreneur, and in Ottawa. He endowed the money to Sprott. Now we've got this shiny new home for the Sprott School of Business, which up until now, Derek, has been kind of been scattered throughout that tower. The tower, you've got a building, a room here, a room there, kind of stuck in a corner. Now they've got their own building, 6 stories, right in the heart of campus. Quite the design, very curvy. If you take a look at our website, you'll see some pictures from inside. So it's designed to be very open, very much that sort of that collaborative type of environment, right? Where students are going to be expected to kind of sit together. You can, and people just generally, especially on the ground floor, there's a huge area there where they're really hoping that students, their profs, entrepreneurs from the wider community will get together and share ideas and have those collisions, as they like to say. so it's got, all the latest bells and whistles, all the latest technology in the classrooms, set up for remote learning, and it's really, they're hoping it's going to become a bit of a community hub. One of the key things is they're opening an innovation hub where they're going to invite students from all faculties, not just business, to come and work on businesses with professors from Sprott. In the incubator, they're going to have hackathons, pitch fests, all that sort of stuff.
Love it.
It's just designed to kind of open up to more students to the idea that, hey, entrepreneurship can be a future career path, and trying to spark that enthusiasm for entrepreneurship. So I talked to Dana Brown last week, toured the building. Dana Brown is the dean of Sprott. She was just very enthusiastic, really hoping that this kind of is Sprott's coming out party almost to the world. That you've got a great business school here in Ottawa, and now they're able to show it off in the new building.
Yeah, and Carleton, over the years has had some negative things said about them, and I think it's always been a shame, quite frankly, because it is a fantastic university here in the city. Really appreciate hearing from you, Dave. Thanks so much for joining us again today.
All right, Derek, thanks a lot.
All right, take care. That's Dave Sali, editor of the Ottawa Business Journal. For more top business stories, by the way, head over to obj.ca. They have some other incredible stories. You can click into the awards section there as well, find out more information and some more incredible success stories. It's a fabulous spot. If you're interested in what's happening in the business community, don't go anywhere. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow on Rogers TV and City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning. This is Monday, the 13th of September. I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, mainly sunny, 19 degrees. Here's what's making news this hour. Protesters against vaccine mandates have their sights set on the Ottawa Hospital this afternoon as they plan demonstrations outside several medical facilities across the country. The demonstration is set to begin at 2 o'clock. Ontario reports 600 new cases of COVID-19 today and 4 more deaths linked to the virus. The health minister says 79% of today's new cases are are in people who are not fully vaccinated or whose vaccination status is unknown. Final week of the federal election campaign, and the parties are now focusing on getting you to actually vote. It's the final day of advanced polls, and you can still ask for a mail-in ballot, but that has to be done by 6 tomorrow night if you want to cast a ballot, if you don't want to cast a ballot in person on Election Day. New stunt driving rules are now in effect across Ontario. One of the first to experience that tougher penalty, a G2 driver. The OPP say that person was going 199 kilometers an hour in a 100 zone. The driver losing their license for 30 days. Their vehicle's been impounded for 14. The OPP says the 417 is not the Autobahn. City News Time 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Well, the firmness, the fairness, and the fun remains here on the Rob Snow Show. Rob, though, is off this week. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV filling in. And we've been talking, of course, a lot about COVID-19, about the pandemic, many different ways to look at, this situation. But by the way, the Ontario's COVID-19 Science Advisory Table, if you haven't visited their website, I mean, it is an incredible resource of information. They talk everything from the incidence, severity, and management of COVID-19 and critically ill pregnant individuals. Of course, they have their update on COVID-19 projections, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on opioid-related harm, and it just goes on and on. And this is a collective lens, by the way, into emerging scientific evidence. So if you want to find out more, and we talked about looking at some resources earlier on in the show, it's a great spot. I am actually joined by senior scientist with the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute and a member of Ontario's COVID-19 Science Advisory Table, Dr. Doug Manuel. Dr. Manuel, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Dirk.
Such a pleasure having you here. We're talking fourth wave. We're being told we're in the fourth wave. So if we are, how bad is it? And is the worst yet to come as far as the advisory table is concerned?
Yeah, the worst is yet to come. I guess that's the bad news. We are increasing in Ottawa. We're doing better than many places around the country and around the world, for that matter. And I'm often optimistic for Ottawa. This time last year, I was thinking, oh no, we don't need a fall wave in 2020. And I was initially proved wrong. Cases went up, and then we actually had a really good October, November. So I was partly right, partly wrong. I'm still optimistic for Ottawa for this fall. But generally the projections are upward. On 613 COVID that we run, projections are upward. The numbers are increasing, positivity rates increasing.
What's driving that?
It's our being with each other, and Delta. Delta is just so infectious. Like if we had Delta this time last year, I don't think we could stop it. And now we've got a lot of people vaccinated, and that's slowing things down. But in the fall, we have increase. Kids go back to school, we go back to work, and we move indoors more. So I would really sort of say keep all of our activities outdoors as much as possible and ease into the fall with maintaining your distancing and the lower number of contacts indoors, especially.
Yeah, well, and that's obviously a big issue because back to school. There's been a lot of media coverage around the lack of sufficient surveillance testing in schools. Is how important is for those, first of all, that aren't familiar with surveillance testing. Maybe you could explain what it is and how important it is.
Well, around the world, one of the key indicators of countries or jurisdictions that have done well with COVID has been testing and contact tracing. And so, when people are told they have COVID, they are more likely to stay at home. And as well, we can reach out to people. Public health can reach out to people that have been in contact and say, reduce your contacts, stay at home. And so it's really one of the key measures that we've used over the last 18 months to control COVID. Okay. And in schools, like schools are last year were great in a lot of ways, right? Because, if you have a kid come back with positive COVID and they're in school, you immediately think, oh, what about those other kids in school? So you immediately reach out to the school and the teachers and can notify those in the classroom. It's hard to do, like if you hear from a case that they were in Canadian Tire on Wednesday,
Right, yeah.
But
difficult to track.
Yeah, it's difficult to track, but with the kids, we can actually track them. And so that's one reason why I've thought that we should get the kids back in school. There's been a debate, like the general thinking is that, you bring kids in school and it will increase transmission, but there's some evidence to say that you can actually interrupt transmission more quickly. So,
I never thought of that. There's actually, there's control in place within that system, right?
Yeah. The Science Table wrote a long paper about schools. It was actually led by Anisha here with infectious disease and infection control at Geo. Was the lead author, and I sort of say for businesses, read that report because it talks about the importance of testing and tracing and ventilation, and so those principles that we really actually have applied in schools have been keeping schools open, and I think they're key for everyone.
How important will vaccination for kids 5 to 12 be, in your opinion, or 5 to 11, I guess? And how close do you think we are to that becoming a reality?
Well, I was just reading on the news as well that it may be moved up, and I'll hear at our meetings this week more details. In general, the timeline has been about 2 to 3 months after the trials have closed that the vaccines will be approved. So the vaccine trials close, the data is analyzed, it's passed on to the regulatory agencies, and that all takes a few months. The trials are still open. So I've been told sort of December, January, but I'm hearing that time might be moved up. But the trials are still open. So I think, December, January, maybe November, but I'm just hearing that from the news as well. In terms of the importance, I think it's important in a few ways. One is that the kids are transmitters. And so, there's a lot of them. And when I look at the numbers, I kind of look at the numbers in terms of vaccination opposite to most. This is a little maybe epidemiologist inside. Okay. But when I look, I sort of, my thumbnail is Ottawa, 1 million people or 1,050,000. And when I see, 750,000 vaccinated, I just look at and think that's, or 800, I say, that's 250,000 people aren't vaccinated who can transmit or could end up in hospital. And so that's a huge number still that are floating out around there that are to get vaccinated. So we need to move those numbers down, and vaccinating the kids is going to be really important.
Yeah.
I think the other part is that, it's interesting, Derek, we're going to start having discussion. I'm sure I'll be back on the show talking with Rob as well throughout the fall about our transition to the next phase of the pandemic. And, once we get through this wave, like now we can't really open up because there's just that 250,000 people who might end up in hospital. But once we get past this wave and get that level of immunization a bit higher, and then as well, people are going to start getting COVID who are unvaccinated. We're going to get a community immunity up, and then we'll start talking about opening up. But you can't really have that conversation until like when we've talked about Science Table, until we get our kids vaccinated. You can't talk about kind of like we want to protect the kids. So I think getting our people who are on the can't list, their kids, our third shot for our really older people in long-term care homes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Booster shots for the elderly. You just mentioned it, so I'm gathering you and your colleagues think that's a great idea. And even on a personal level, someone that got AstraZeneca and then Moderna, would it be a good idea for myself to get a booster shot down the road?
Well, you might have the best combo. You probably have the best combo of anyone.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, you're in really good shape. But immunity wanes, and it wanes. I think there's two concerns. The main discussion is immunity wanes, and for the older people, that means that they could get quite sick. And we're seeing Israel right now highest ever level of hospitalizations. And one reason is they were the first out of the gates in terms of being vaccinated. So they're your oldest folks have been vaccinated 8-9 months, So that's one issue. And then one that's not discussed as much is about that I think we should consider is if we boost people, then they will be less likely to infect others. So you don't really need, like, for someone like you may not need the booster. You don't really need the booster to prevent you from a severe infection, but you're probably running about 85% effectiveness for getting infection and then transmitting to others. So, another consideration is giving a third shot to get you up to, we would probably increase you. And again, numbers coming out of Israel say that if we gave you a third shot, you'd be less likely to get sick at all and transmit to others.
If the effectiveness begins to wane, are we not telling people that are hesitant to get it that hey, you may be right?
No, I would say the opposite. The interesting discussion is that we're all going to be exposed. You're going to be exposed. I'm going to be exposed most likely. And what that means with us being vaccinated, I've been vaccinated, that we will get a very mild or asymptomatic disease. And then us being infected will then further boost our immunity. And over years, we're going to build up our immunity so that we're going to be challenged maybe through boosters or through being exposed and build up our community immunity. That's going to happen to everyone, whether you're vaccinated or not.
So is that common with other vaccines, like the vaccines that we get, for school, for polio and diphtheria and measles and mumps and that kind of thing? Are they different types of vaccines?
Well, there's two parts. Yeah, I think it happens for every vaccine, and some infections have longer immunity than others, and some that will prevent you against severe disease more or lesser disease. So it happens for everything, but that you and I've got a great start. People who are unvaccinated, the first time they're infected, they're going to more likely have a really severe disease, but you're not.
Right.
And then we're going to move into this transition where we're living with it, and it will be more like, you can't avoid the cold viruses. You can't avoid chickenpox. This is infectious chickenpox. So
and it'll be like the flu and the cold, and inevitably you may get it, but it's not going to be severe, and you'll take a few days off work like you would with the flu.
Yeah, and for people who are, again, immunocompromised, not vaccinated, it's not the flu.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah,
that's the idea. Like, over time, we'll slowly build up our immunity, and we'll have less. That's the hope. We'll have less severe disease, so we can go out and do what we did pre-pandemic, and it will be amongst us. But we won't have as many people ending up in hospital.
Right, Dr. Manuel, always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me again today.
My pleasure.
Dr. Manuel, the senior scientist with the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, and he's also a member of Ontario's COVID-19 Science Advisory Table. You can look them up, by the way, and check that out as another resource. As we know, there are protests planned in front of hospitals across the country today. Dr. Adam Kassam, we get his thoughts on that right after this. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob all week long, right here on Rogers TV and City News.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manatic, the Manatic Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub, along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer, some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out of our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off this week. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV filling in. By the way, local campaign coverage on Rogers TV. You can visit their website to find out the schedule, to find out what's happening. And if you want to hear from some of your local candidates. Protests. That's what we're talking about now. There are protests planned in front of hospitals across the country today. The group allegedly organizing the protests, Canadian Frontline Nurses, issued posts on social media calling for peaceful protests against mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers. I'm just looking at their tweet here that they put out. They have locations in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, here in Ottawa at the Ottawa Hospital, and then Quebec, New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. Their taglines are Health Freedom Movement Standing Together Again for Informed Consent and Medical Freedoms. Peaceful protest, and then they have a hashtag. They're asking protesters to bring a flower and a note to leave in honor of someone affected by COVID measures, or share your story and how you've been affected. You just heard from Andrew Boyle in the news that our mayor has spoken out against it. So has Doug Ford. Many other MPPs have spoken as well. We'd like to get the perspective of the president of the Ontario Medical Association when it comes to the protest, Dr. Adam Kassam. Dr. Kassam, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Derek.
The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario and the Ontario Medical Association are calling for safe zones around hospitals and other health settings where patients seek the care they need, of course, and where healthcare professionals work. You're in this field, Dr. Kassam. What is just, first of all, just the feeling when people in your profession see these protests outside healthcare centers?
Well, Derek, we've heard from our doctors that a lot of the protests that have been happening over the past couple of weeks, and of course, we think that has, been an increase in terms of both scope and size, and possibly related to some of the political advocacy that's happening on the campaign trail right now. We know that doctors and nurses, as well as other frontline healthcare workers, are working tooth and nail to really care for the patients who they see in their hospitals. Many of them who are COVID related, but also non-COVID related patients. And so it is disappointing to have these protests outside of areas and hospitals and healthcare institutions where this kind of treatment and life-saving treatment is happening. we know that people are frustrated. And one of the things I think is important to recognize is that any of these protests represent a very, very small minority of people in our society. But nevertheless, we know that people who go to hospitals are those who are sick, who have to get treatment, who are there for potentially life-saving care. And having the inability to get in and out of a hospital, for example, as a result of these protests, frankly, shouldn't be happening. And, when we think about protests at a political level, it's okay to voice your opinion, but when that impacts someone else's ability to get care, that's when things should change.
And I think we should certainly, look at those with certain health, underlying health issues that certainly cannot get the vaccine, and they aren't part of this conversation, Dr. Kassam. There are people that legitimately cannot get the vaccine, correct?
That's correct. There are, obviously, we've been hearing in the news, and of course, children under the age of 12 are not eligible. And so if it's a pediatric population we're speaking about, of course, they're at risk, given the fact that vaccines have yet to be approved for their use in this patient population, given their age. However, as you're describing, there are also immunocompromised patients who might be at an increased risk of getting COVID-19, even if they've had the vaccine. And so what we know is that their ability to receive care, timely care, proper care, is paramount in the course of the pandemic. And we should have an environment where not only the healthcare workers, but also the patients that they serve should be able to do so peacefully and without interruption.
How do we go about, do you have any opinions on how can we go about educating and reinforcing the vaccine for those that are vaccine hesitant?
Derek, it's a very important point because as you're describing, we still need to get our vaccination numbers up. We need to have those conversations in our communities, in hard-reaching places where perhaps access to the vaccine is still a concern, or a lack of understanding, or proper information that's being disseminated can be a challenge. And so when we are having these conversations in our clinics with our patients, we want to focus on what is known about the virus as well as the vaccines. We want to be able to provide that important information, but we also want to listen. We want to be able to understand where our patients are at and hopefully guide them along this journey, because this is an important decision, and we are optimistic, and I'm confident that as we start having more of those conversations, we'll be able to get more people fully vaccinated.
For someone that has a serious reaction to COVID-19 and find themselves hospitalized, what kind of care are we looking at? How long are we seeing people that end up in ICUs? How long do we see them remain in hospital?
Derek, the first point I think is important to make is we're now seeing that this pandemic has become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. This fourth wave is predominantly, far and away, being seen in patients who have not been vaccinated. And so when we think about the first few waves and the ICU capacities being really overrun with patients, generally speaking, now we're seeing that potentially continue to happen, but predominantly those who are unvaccinated. And so their morbidity and even chance of unfortunately succumbing to the disease is quite substantial. I think the CDC or the FDA actually came out, I think over the weekend, saying that your chance of unfortunately dying as a result of COVID if you do not have the vaccine is 10 times that if you've already had the vaccine. And in certain circumstances, it's significantly higher than that. And so, again, this goes back to advocacy, education, understanding, and respect for sort of that dialogue. And hopefully, as we're continuing into the months of the fall, we'll be able to get people vaccinated at a significant rate.
Where would you encourage people that, again, are perhaps anti-vaccination or hesitant? Where would you encourage them to go to? What kind of resources are available out there for them to find out more information, to have those checks and balances, I guess, that are incredibly important to them?
Absolutely. We know that there are many, many resources now out in the communities in all parts of the province, including in Ottawa where you are, or in Toronto where I'm at, or even in smaller communities. There are obviously health professionals who are available to speak to, whether that's a family doctor, a pediatrician, or another trusted advisor in that community. That's usually where those important conversations happen. In fact, I had a conversation with a patient of mine over the weekend concerned about the vaccine, and we were able to kind of have a discussion. And so I think reaching out to someone that you trust who is local is going to be very important. There are also other hotlines that you can access through the phone or through Zoom, things like VaxFact, for example, in the GTA region. And so these are really, really good resources for people who are still on the fence, who are still concerned about the vaccine and want to have a direct and perhaps a very intimate conversation with someone that they trust.
Dr. Kassam, excellent conversation on this, great dialogue. Really appreciate you spending time with us this morning.
My pleasure. Anytime, Derek.
That's Dr. Adam Kassam, president of the Ontario Medical Association.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News. This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.